All right, good afternoon, folks. Can everybody hear me? I'll take that as a yes. All right. Well, it's 12:02, so I think I'll go ahead and get started. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining our webinar today called Senate Bill 639 and the End of Subminimum Wage Employment in California. This event is hosted by Disability Rights California, the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, and Legal Aid at Work. We are co-sponsors to Senate Bill 639, authored by Senator Durazo, which is a critically important measure to finally end the practice of paying workers with disabilities less than the minimum wage. My name is Gregory Kramer, and I'm a legislative advocate here at Disability Rights California. We're pleased to host a number of diverse guests with unique experiences with subminimum wage employment and to gain a better understanding of the national and state advocacy efforts to end this exploitative practice. Before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. For participating panelists, please keep your microphone muted and camera off until you are called on. And secondly, closed captioning will be available. If you'd like to turn on or off closed captioning, please locate the CC icon at the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitles or Hide Subtitles. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with some opening remarks by Senator Maria Elena Durazo about Senate Bill 639. And Senator Durazo is a tireless champion for people with disabilities and especially in the realm of labor rights for all workers. That's why it's no surprise that she is spearheading the movement to end subminimum wage employment here in California. Senator Durazo represents California Senate District 24, which encompasses downtown Los Angeles, and has spent most of her professional life as a well-respected labor leader and champion for people with disabilities. So without further ado, please let's hear from Senator Durazo.
Thank you to DRC, Eric Harris, and Gregory Kramer, and everyone that we partner with during the time that I've been here as a legislator, and many times in my former work as a union organizer. You know, as a union organizer, the work that I did was really about elevating people who normally were treated as less. They weren't given the same respect and dignity that other human beings had. So they would define the worth of the person as what kind of work they did. So if you're a farm worker, that's dirty work, you're less than others. If you're a hotel housekeeper, that's backbreaking work, you're not worth as much as others. So I spent my whole life next to, side by side with very, very courageous men and women who had to fight to be elevate themselves to get the same respect and rights as other people. California was the birthplace of the disability rights movement, and we should be the national and global leader in labor force participation rates in the competitive labor market for people with all types of disabilities or not. President Biden and Vice President Harris have challenged us to, quote unquote, build back better after the pandemic. And California needs to take that challenge seriously. But if we're going to build back better, we must center diversity, equality, and inclusion, including persons with disabilities. Working with Disability Rights California and other disability organizations across the state, California is going to make sure that we have policies that maximize opportunities for people with all types of disabilities to prepare for and achieve success in this post-COVID economy. So even as California prides itself in leading the country with our over $15 minimum wage, thousands of Californians with disabilities are still being are still working in segregated settings, and some for less than $2 per hour. Segregated employment is antithetical to our values as a state and reinforces the false notion that people with disabilities are unable to be integrated in society and are incapable of producing labor of value. So our bill, SB 639, prohibits the issuance of new 14C certificates by January of 2022 and develops a phase-out plan for current certificate holders to ensure a path to competitive and integrated employment. Our bill will end the practice of segregated subminimum wage employment entirely. California needs to join the ranks of other states who've already ended this arcane practice of paying people with disabilities less than the minimum wage. SB 639 is not a partisan measure. Sisters and brothers, it is a measure to offer dignity to workers with disabilities, and it ensures by offering them the same wage protections as their peers. I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you all. Gracias, and have a great afternoon.
Great. Thank you so much to Senator Durazo for providing those remarks on Senate Bill 639. I'm happy to just go over a little bit more detail about Senate Bill 639 and how it came to be and how subminimum wage employment also came to be in this country. So in 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act established minimum wage laws to ensure that workers were able to provide for themselves and their families. However, Section 14C of the Act created an exception to the minimum wage requirement, allowing employers to apply for a certificate that would authorize them to pay employees with disabilities subminimum wages. This exception is antiquated, unnecessary, and unequitable. Yet California still uses 14C certificates, which offer employers a pool of cheap labor of workers with intellectual or developmental disabilities in segregated settings, also known as sheltered workshops. These workers are often paid pennies on the dollar, sometimes $2 an hour, as the senator explained. 5 years ago, there were just over 22,000 Californians working in a subminimum wage environment, and this number has declined. The number of 14C certificate holders also continues to decrease from 150 in 2016 to 81 in late 2020. Segregated employment is antithetical to our values and reinforces the false notion that people with disabilities are unable to be integrated in society and producing labor of value. So what this bill does, it would prevent the issuance of new 14C certificates by January 1st, 2022, and develops a phase-out plan for current certificate holders to ensure a path to competitive integrated employment. By 2025, this bill will end the practice of segregated subminimum wage employment entirely. And if enacted, California will join the states of Alaska, Connecticut, Colorado, Hawaii, Maryland, Maine, New Hampshire, and Washington in prohibiting subminimum wage employment. This bill is supported by dozens of labor organizations, disability advocacy organizations, school districts, and numerous self-advocates and family members statewide. So we will now feature a clip from the documentary Bottom Dollars, which details the struggles of subminimum wage employees and how this structure keeps people with disabilities subordinate in the workforce and in society. So please go ahead and air the Bottom Dollars clip.
People with disabilities are not capable of working. That's the biggest lie I ever heard.
The minimum wage is offered to everybody. except for people with disabilities.
People with disabilities are being paid less than minimum wage.
On average, under $2 an hour across the country.
How would you like to work for 2 weeks and come out with a $6 check?
It's all based on the assumption that they're less capable than other individuals.
No, it's not fair.
It could be perfectly legal.
The management is making very, very significant six-figure salaries.
Companies have told us that if they had to pay half of minimum wage, that they would probably go bankrupt.
They're just building this own business for themselves, don't you think?
I'm a person with a disability, and I've been able to, find jobs that pay me what I deserve.
I may have a disability, but I can still work. I oversee the Bob Boyd Honda Facebook page. It's great. I interact with customers, I talk to the workers, I get paid. I love it.
I work at Powell's bookstore. I use assistive technology to help me do what I cannot do physically.
I am super proud of my job. I'm in the shipping and receiving at the Boston Children's Hospital.
Here I am today, a business owner. I own Pop and Joe's Kettle Corn. You know the greatest disability there is? It is low expectation.
People with disabilities can be paid sub-minimum wage. We don't feel that's right.
There's no reason to pay us less than the minimum wage.
When I'm working, I feel that I should be paid as an equal person.
Rooted in Rights presents an original documentary. Bottom Dollars. For the full film, go to bottomdollarsmovie.com. Tomorrow, music by Charles Strauss, lyrics by Martin Charnin, performed by Katrina Melograna.
Thank you for that. And for folks that are interested in watching the full Bottom Dollars documentary, it's available for free on YouTube. You're welcome to go to rootedinrights.org, and it should redirect you to their YouTube channel where you could get a better understanding of what the impacts of subminimum wage employment are on workers throughout the country. And so now for this piece of the presentation, we're going to shift over to our panel. We're very pleased to bring out a guest from the East Coast. Senate Bill 639 was actually influenced by Maryland's Ken Capone Equal Employment Act in 2016, which phased out the subminimum wage certificates in that state. That's why we're pleased to be joined by Matt Rice of the ARC Maryland, who is a lead advocate for the act. And Matt Rice has over a decade of experience of working for disability advocacy organizations, including Shared Support Maryland and People on the Go of Maryland. He's a graduate of the Maryland School for the Blind and Parkville High School, and now focuses his efforts on state legislation and public policy affecting the lives of Marylanders with intellectual and developmental disabilities. He is the current chair of the Developmental Disabilities Administration's Quality Advisory Council and a board member of Maryland Works Incorporated. Matt, welcome.
Thank you for having me today to discuss this most important, if emotionally charged topic of the elimination of 14C. I think that California has always historically been a leader within our nation, and California can do this. So I bring you greetings from your friends and allies in the state of Maryland. We are watching to see how this plays out and how we can help eliminate this discriminatory and antiquated practice of paying people with disabilities less than the minimum wage.
Well, thank you for that, Matt. I'm curious, maybe you might be able to describe some of the impacts of the Ken Capone Equal Employment Act on workers with disabilities in Maryland, and see if you had any advice for us in California who are trying to follow suit.
Sure. So I think, looking back at the Ken Capone Equal Employment Act and its passage, we were able to pass this legislation within its first year. It was kind of the perfect storm. Maryland had become an employment first state. We had been studying in various groups the issue of 14C for many years. And what we found when, looking at the numbers is that 14C certificates were already on the decline, and the advocates historically spoke up and said, we want to be paid what we deserve for our work. We deserve to be in integrated employment, and that was heard overwhelmingly. I think the greatest impact that the Ken Capone Equal Employment Act has had is it has forced us to look at our conversations that we have with people about what it is they want to do with their time, whether that's pursuing integrated employment or other activities, because, what we found is some people who had been working in workshops for 30 some years, they didn't necessarily want integrated employment, but they wanted more meaningful activities. It's about the conversations that you have to have with people. And I think 14C takes away the ability and the expectation for people to do that. If I give somebody a choice of just going to the, just sitting at home or going to the workshop, they're going to choose to go to the workshop, but that's not what they want to do with their time. So looking back on it, I think the greatest contribution that the Equal Employment Act has had is the ability for us to look at our person-centered planning processes and force us to look people in the eye and talk to them about what it is they want to do. I've heard stories from parents who said, we were against this, but we, talked to our child in a way that we never had before because 14C was there. And it was, negating those conversations. So you're not taking anything away by eliminating 14C. What you're doing is you're creating opportunities for those who may not even know that they have the opportunity to pursue integrated and competitive employment.
Thank you for that feedback, Matt. It's really inspiring to see how other states are doing it. We're really hoping that California takes a model from Maryland in implementing this. I think, some of the measured outcomes that you have in the Maryland statute in terms of providing person-centered approaches and phasing it out were important as well. And that's certainly something that Senate Bill 639 aims to do. So we really appreciate you joining us today.
Certainly.
All right. And so with that, we'll shift over to our next speaker, Ken Barnes. He's the president and CEO of Options for All. Ken has served as the president and CEO since February of 2020. And Options for All is a program and services provider in San Diego County that has effectively assisted in providing vocational opportunities, life skills training, and affordable housing to individuals with developmental disabilities since 1985. So Ken, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So could you just describe a little bit about Options for All and why you ended subminimum wage employment and what some of the impacts were on workers with disabilities in your experience?
Well, thank you, Greg. What I found when I came on board, I was a bit troubled by kind of why we did it. I guess that's where it started, was with the question. And as I dug into it, from my perspective, what I found is this was just an option, and that we chose to support persons in jobs and source and find jobs for the people that we serve, that we've been charged to serve with, sub-minimum wage jobs, because it was kind of easy versus going out and making the advocacy and making the point that all persons, if they provide an hour of labor, they should be paid for an hour of labor under the same wage laws that others are. And then there's the impacts on their family. I mean, this is pretty widespread. There's a big difference in someone bringing home, as we saw in the video, a paycheck for $6 versus a paycheck for $600. And those are the types of differences that we see. The transition time is something that's brought up. We've talked a lot on SB 639 on the kind of the nuances of it. But I think that the big thing that persons have said is, well, how do you transition? What happens? Are we going to leave people behind and essentially create a situation where there's nothing for them to do during the day? They're stuck at home watching TV or what have you. And I reject that based upon what we found. We're headquartered in San Diego, but we operate pretty significant operations in the Inland Empire, based out of San Bernardino, as well as in Silicon Valley and Santa Cruz. And so we're kind of all across the state. We can see what's happening in both higher areas where the cost of living is significantly higher and areas where the cost of living is lower. What we found consistently is that if we say to an employer, here's somebody is a great employee, we're going to support them, we'll help train them. They say, hey, this is fantastic. How can I be part of that? And it really comes down to a choice, Gregory, where you can decide as a business entity, as a service provider, if you're going to operate with a 14C certificate. Frankly, there is a profit in there that you could make, right? Because if you charge someone a particular fee for the labor, how much of that profit margin you keep for yourself. I think how we ensure that persons aren't left behind is we can use what's called group employment as kind of a transition to competitive integrated employment. And what that basically means is you have persons, instead of in a massive warehouse making a couple of dollars an hour, you have a group of three supported by one person, and they're able to go into a job, make fair above market rate wages on that job, and then help train them and get them ready to be able to eventually work on their own in competitive integrated employment. So you don't have a gap or a place where people are dumped. That's just not accurate, and that's not what we found, and that's been really embraced. And we've been able to do that dozens and dozens of times, again and again and again. It's not like once or twice. And we found over 160 jobs just during COVID alone. So that's why I say I know that it's that paying sub-minimum wages really is a choice. It's not a necessity. And I would leave it with this. I never like to use the terms all, because all is never accurate. There are a number of people who are concerned about this transition, and rightfully so. It's for their loved ones. How will it impact? There's an emotional response that some would have with it. But I think we can't lose track of the fact that this is a industry, if you will. 14C is an industry. It is very profitable. There are millions and millions of dollars at stake in individual companies, and that we can allow a segment of the population, because remember, there's a group of people who do not believe there should be a minimum wage for anyone. And what we've allowed is for that thinking to take a foothold in our industry and just simply make the argument that, well, we're doing it for what's in the best interest of persons with disabilities. And the reality is we need to stand up for that the same way that we would for someone without a disability. And so if there's any questions, people are free to follow up and ask me that. As Gregory knows, I'm an open book and happy to chat with anyone. So thank you for your time.
And thank you so much, Ken. I just want to thank you and to Matt for joining us and providing a little bit more rationale on both of your efforts. So appreciate it once again. So at this point, I'll go ahead and introduce my colleagues. Rachel Langston, she's a staff attorney of LGBT and gender equity and disability rights programs at Legal Aid at Work. And Bridget Kolakowski, who's the Deputy Director of Policy and Public Affairs for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Both of them are co-sponsoring Senate Bill 639. So perhaps you could conclude with some next steps.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate you moderating. And a big thank you to Matt Rice and Ken Barnes. Your contributions are invaluable. As we conclude, we wanted to leave you with advocacy materials and a status update for SB 639. The bill is currently in the Appropriations Committee, and it will be heard at the end of the month. Assuming that it actually passes out of appropriations, it will go to the Assembly floor vote for a full vote of the 80-member Assembly. And then assuming it passes off the Assembly floor, it will face the final vote in the Senate, and then it will go to the governor for signature. The governor is going to have until October 14th or October 15th to sign or veto the bill. And that's the update on the bill. I could pass it over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Bridget. We're urging support of this important policy and encourage everyone to contact your assembly member to express your support. In the email confirmation that you received to participate in this webinar, we included advocacy materials that everyone is welcome to use. Some critics of SB 639 want to keep disabled workers' wages low. Most are employers whose business model is based on low pay. This is an unacceptable and outdated business practice that needs to end. SB 639 offers dignity to workers with disabilities and provides a path to economic independence. And with your help, it can be California law. Thank you again for joining and have a great afternoon.